Another awesome feature is the ability to change how parameters are populated on encoders. We can assign specific mapping to fixtures and to users. Let's dive into encoder maps. First, we'll need to open up our custom encoder map tab, which is tab 40, right here. And before we can do anything, we'll need to create our first map. So I'm going to go ahead and type 1 enter to create that. On the bottom part of your screen, you'll see a list of targets like we're familiar with in several other areas of the console. And in the top part of the screen, I'll draw your attention to the left side. We have intensity, focus, color, shutter, image, and form boxes. Those are going to represent each of the categories that we can switch to on our console when we're using encoders. Across the top, we have our defaults, which we'll get to in a moment. And below that, we have our encoder pages. So we can have up to 25 pages of encoders per category. To build our first one, let's go ahead and select focus here. And I'm going to select the first box here, which is going to correspond with the first encoder. We will get a pop-up menu here looking for a parameter. And this is going to look a lot like the pop-up menu we see in the fixture editor. So here I can choose parameters from a fixture profile. This will show us all the profiles currently patched in the show. I can get parameter sets. We'll look at that in a moment. I can use common parameters. These are some of the more commonly used parameters you'll find. And then I have all 6 categories here. And under each of these is every parameter that is in the library in any fixture. So they are quite extensive. The other option, and this is the one I like to use, is simply with the search box here on the top. So I'm going to type in pan, and you'll see there it is right there under common. And I can select that, and that will populate it in the first encoder. You'll notice that a second row or a second page of encoders has appeared as soon as I populate the first one. For the second encoder, I'm going to select that. We are going to make that tilt. The third one, I want to be zoom. And the fourth one, I want to be edge. The fifth column is for our widget. This is a selectable option. We have some color pickers here, we have a shutter tool, and we have some color control that will populate in the encoder display area of our hardware or software. For today, let's pick the CIE XY color picker. We'll leave that there. All right, so we've set up our first page on this encoder map on the focus category. Let's switch to the color category and start to set that one up. For this one, go ahead and click the first box again. Again, that's the first encoder. And now we're going to use one of those parameter sets. So I'm going to make this first one be RGB. And you'll see that that populates red, green, and blue for me so that I don't have to find each of those 3 individually. It's just a little bit of a shortcut. And on the second row, which has appeared, I'm going to use another parameter set, CMY. And now I want the fourth encoder, which we haven't assigned yet, on each page to be CTO. So I'm just going to use my search box to find CTO. And I want to be able to access that from either page, so that's why I'm going to put it on both there. And also notice that by default, the widget on the color category is the CIE XY widget. We'll talk a little bit about those different colors over there in just a moment. For now, this is all we're going to do on this encoder map, so we are going to give it a label of default. Now we need to actually assign this as our default encoder map. The default encoder map is assigned per user, and we can do it right up here at the top. Just click that box and say 1, enter. This setting can also be found in setup. So that will be under setup, user settings, and manual control. And it's right over here under encoder map. Let's go into Live and see how we can apply a custom encoder map. I'm going to open up my encoder display, and I'm going to select channel 101. So right now we are looking at the standard EOS mapping. These parameters are mapped to these encoder categories based on the fixture profile. If you are on a console with a dedicated encoder screen, your custom button will be located on the screen here. If you are on a console without a dedicated encoder touchscreen, you can simply use the custom button located here in the encoder display. I'm going to go ahead and enable that now by clicking on that. You'll see that inside the custom button, it displays the current map being used. In this case, it's the default. I'm here on the focus category, and when I enabled custom, you can see that pan and tilt are still where they were, but now zoom and edge are also present because that is what we defined in our default encoder map. You can also see our CIE XY widget here. I can expand that widget by using these arrows here to make that a little bit larger. You'll notice I can still see my parameters at the bottom of the encoder display, which will correspond, of course, with my 4 encoders on the console. I'm going to collapse that widget down. If we look at our color category, you'll see here in the first page, our first 3 encoders are blank, and then the 4th one has CTO. That's because we have channel 101 selected, and on our first page of the custom map, we defined those parameters to be red, green, and blue, which this fixture does not have. That's why they're blank. If we switch to the second page, now we'll see our CMY as well as our CTO again, just like we defined it. I'm going to click on to the third page. So a special feature of the default map only is that any parameters that were not assigned to the map will be added to the end of each category. So in this case, the color select and the color mix mode were not included in our default map, but they've been added to the end of the category here, so we still have access to them. This only occurs on the default map. I'm going to select another fixture now. We'll grab channel 51. And on color, I'm going to switch back to the first page. So this fixture is an RGB lime fixture. So now back on the first page of the color category, we see the red, green, blue. We don't see CTO because this fixture does not have a CTO parameter. If I go to the second page, it is completely blank now because this fixture does not have cyan, magenta, yellow, and again, does not have CTO. And then our third color page is going to have the parameters that were not included in the default map. In this case, lime, hue, and saturation. To disable the custom map and go back to the standard EOS mapping, we can simply deselect the custom button, whether you're on a console with a dedicated encoder touchscreen or not. Once that is deselected, we are back to the standard mapping, which for this selected fixture shows red, lime, green, and blue on the first page of the color category. Let's go back into our Encoder Maps tab and take a look at default parameters. Default parameters exist to help you quickly build maps, so they will populate the same parameter or widget in the same encoder on every page within a category. So right now, the CIE XY widget is being used as a default. So you can see we use our by type color coding here. So up top is our leader parameter equivalent in the blue color, and then each subsequent page is showing that widget in magenta, just like a follower channel on a by type palette. So let's go ahead and remove one of these CTOs to show how that works. I'm going to select that and say clear, just to remove that from the second page. And now up in the default area, I can click here and you'll see I get the same selection tools available to me as when I'm picking any parameter. I'm going to select CTO, and you'll see in the default it's that blue color because that's the leader parameter. And on page 2, where it was blank, it's now filled in with a magenta follower parameter using the by type conventions. The CTO on page 1 is still white because we had defined it specifically there before we had the default parameter. Let's go ahead and add a parameter on our third page to show what happens. On this first box, I'm just going to make that be blue. And as soon as there's something on that page, you'll see that CTO populates in the 4th encoder slot. I'm going to go ahead and clear out this CTO here on the first page. And you'll see once I do that, it doesn't go away, but it turns magenta because it is now following the default parameter. If on any page I want to override the default parameter, I can do that by clicking and simply assigning a different parameter. I also have the ability to delete an entire page quickly. So I'm going to click this 3 here on the third page and say delete, and that will remove the entire row as well as its contents. Now I'm going to click my Show Hide Dedicated Encoder button. Dedicated encoders are the 5th and 6th encoder that are found on some of our larger hardware. I'm currently not on a console with those, but I am able to program them in the case where I'm taking the show file to one of those larger consoles. By default, the dedicated encoders are set to pan and tilt on every category page. However, these can be changed just in the same way that we've been changing parameters on the other categories. For today, I'm going to hide those. Let's go ahead and create a second map. We'll call that map 2. I'll say 2, enter. And I'm going to label this as a Soliframe Theater. For this map, I'm going to use the soft key Create from Fixture. This is going to pull up a search box, which will look familiar. It's the same one we use in Patch. So we do have the ability here to search by any manufacturer. We can use our search box, or we can select from fixtures which are already patched into our show file. I'm going to do that today because I just need a Soliframe Theater, which is right there. What Create from Fixture does is it will utilize the standard EOS mapping in all categories. This makes it really easy to start from a known location and make some edits rather than trying to build an entire fixture up from scratch. Using the Create from Fixture function will also automatically map the same fixture type to this map. More on that in a minute. Let's go ahead and make a few changes to this map. Let's go to Intensity, and I'm just going to clean this up a bit. So intensity macros, rate, and crossfade rate aren't parameters that I use hardly ever. So I'm going to go ahead and clear those out so they're not filling up my encoders all the time. Next, I'm going to switch to our form category. I'm going to delete the second row, which again will remove all of the parameters as well as the page itself for now. And then I want to change shutter strobe to a different parameter. So I'm going to select that and say change parameter. And I want this one to be diffusion. And I do want shutter strobe, but I want it to be down on the second page. So I'm going to add that in the first encoder on the second page. If I am using a custom map and there's a parameter that I've removed from it that I do need access to, I always have the ability to disable custom maps and return to standard EOS mapping, which will always have every parameter for any given fixture. Let's create one more map. I'll make that map 3, and I'm going to label it as color source spot. I'm going to create from fixture again, and I'll use my color source spot direct here. That's in my show file. I want to work on the color category here. I'm going to select the first page and say clear. So this is a little bit different than delete in that it removes the parameters but does not delete the page. So now I have a blank page of encoders to work with. And I'm going to click that first box, and I'm going to use my RGB group from parameter sets here. And I want my fourth encoder to be lime for this fixture. And for this map, I don't want to use hue and saturation. Those are just going to be in my way. So I will go ahead and delete the second page. And I'll leave the widget where it is. I like that there. Now the color source spot doesn't have any focus, shutter, or image parameters. So when I'm programming, if I happen to be on one of those pages when I select this fixture type, they're just going to be blank, which isn't really helpful. So what I'm going to do here is copy and paste this page of parameters onto all of those categories. I can do that by selecting the page here. I'm going to say copy. I can go to focus and paste. I'm going to go to shutter, paste, and image, and paste. Form does have my shutter strobe, so I'm going to leave that alone. I also have the ability to map multiple fixture types to a single encoder map. To look at that, let's copy map 2 to map 4, and then we'll edit map 4. I'm going to change this label to say solar frame theater, and color source spots. So you'll see that right now, the solar frame theater is already mapped to this encoder map because that was there when we copied it over. But I also want to map color source spots here. So I'm going to use the map to fixture soft key, and I'm going to add color source spots. If I add something that I don't want mapped to a fixture, or if I change my mind later, I can remove it from an encoder map by using the red trash can here. So encoder map 4 will be used anytime I have color source spots and solar frame theaters within the same selection. So for that purpose, I want to edit my color parameters. And I want to add a page ahead of the current first page. So to do that, I can click the 1 in the first row here and say insert before, and that will give me a blank page right there. And on this row, I want to use my red, green, blue lime that we had from the last map. So I can actually just select the last map. I can copy. I can hit next to go back to map 4, and I can paste that here. So I can also copy and paste in between maps as well as within a single map. All right, so now on map 4, in the color category, we have a page of red, green, blue, lime, which will be useful for my color source spots. And then on page 2 and 3, we have all of the color parameters available for the solar frame theater. So that will be useful for those. Let's take a look at how this works in live. I'm going to open up my encoder display, and I'm going to select only channel 51, which is a color source spot. And right now, custom maps are not enabled. So this is our default EOS mapping. So we have red, lime, green, blue on the first page. Now let's enable custom. So now you'll see that the console has applied map 3, which is a single page of parameters under the color category. The reason it used map 3 is because right now we only have color source spots selected, and map 3 only has that fixture assigned to it. If we change our selection, say to 51 and 101, which is a color source spot and a solar frame theater, now you'll see in the custom button that we are using our solar frame theater and color source spot map, which is map 4. Again, this is based on our current selection while we have custom encoders enabled. So in map 4, the first page has red, green, blue, lime, but now we have a second and third page with those solar frame theater parameters as well. What happens if we have a channel selection that contains some channels that are assigned to an encoder map and some channels that aren't? Let's take a look at that. I'm going to select 101, which is a solar frame theater, and 121, which is a SolarWash 2000. So far we have not assigned a SolarWash 2000 to any encoder map. So what happens here is the console is going to stack maps. So in this case, it's going to use map 1 and map 2. So map 1 is our default, that's for the SolarWash 2000, and map 2, which is our map just for solar frame theaters. So here in the encoder display, you'll see they're both indicated, and right now neither of them are selected. That's because both maps are stacked together. So on my color category, we're in the first page. So this is our default map, which is red, green, blue, CTO, and then CMY, CTO on the second page. So those are from the first map. And then we're going to continue, and now we're seeing the color pages from the second map here, which is map 2, the solar frame theater map. You have CMY, color select, and then CTO and color mix mode. I also have the option to choose one of the two maps without changing my selection. So I can switch just to my default map, or I can switch just to my solar frame theater map. If I deselect, we'll go back to the stacked maps. And finally, I'm going to select a channel that is not assigned to any map. So if I only select 121, again, this is that SolarWash 2000, we're simply going to use the default map. In the circumstance that multiple maps meet the same criteria, so for example, if you had 3 separate maps that all had a single fixture type assigned to them, and you had selected that fixture type, the console is going to use the lowest numbered encoder map. For the moment, I'm going to disable custom. Let's go back into encoder maps to look at how we can filter maps to different users. First, I'm going to copy map 2 to map 2.1. And I'm going to hit last to go back to map 2. And now I'm going to use my filter to users soft key. So for this one, I'm going to just say user 1, enter, and I'm going to hit next, and I'll say filter to users 2 through 3. In this example, let's say that user 1 had a particular setup that she liked to use when she was programming solar frame theaters. So that could be edited and be independent from the setup in map 2.1, which is what users 2 and 3 prefer. So with the current setup, if custom encoders are enabled, if user 1 selects solar frame theater fixtures, the console is going to use map 2. If user 2 or 3 selects solar frame theaters, the console is going to use map 2.1. If another user, such as user 4, selects solar frame theaters, that user will get the default map, because user 4 is not assigned to any of the solar frame theater specific maps. To restore a map to all users, simply select the map, say filter to users, and press enter. Encoder maps are a great way to get a customized layout by user and by fixture.